adding is greater than 0. That means x can take value only from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. You cannot put up any zero, you cannot put up any negative number or 0 over there. And n has to be greater than 1. Now, why we are saying n has to be greater than 1? Because if I put up the value of n as 1, I will get it as 1 plus x on the LHS. On the RHS also, I'll get 1 plus x. But both are equal, not same. And check, there is no equality sign over here. Hence, this holds true for n greater than 1. But assuming if there was equality sign over here, then it would have been true for all the natural numbers. That is from 1 onwards. So let us write down our proposition first, or the open statement first, and then we can decide upon. So we're writing down Pn denotes the statement or the proposition 1 plus x whole raised to n is greater than 1 plus nx for all x greater than 0 and n greater than 1. Then we are taking the least value which is greater than 1. Least value greater than 1 in the natural number is 2. So we are saying n is equal to 2. When I substitute n equal to 2, I'll get 1 plus x the whole square. When I expand this, I'll be getting it as 1 plus 2x plus x square. But I wanted only first two terms, and I don't want equality. So I should justify somehow that the number which is added as a third term is a number which is greater than or equal to 0. Now, if I say this is greater than or equal to 0, then my expression will be greater than or equal to 1 plus 2x. But I don't want equal to, I want greater than. So I should prove that x square is strictly greater than 0. Now, how will I get this? Please check. I have been given a condition that x is greater than 0. If x is greater than 0, naturally its square will be greater than 0. So it says this particular term is greater than 1 plus 2x. As x is greater than 0, this implies x square is greater than 0. So this simply says LHS is greater than RHS. So P2 is true. Hence Pn is true for n equal to 2. And then we are going to go for induction hypothesis. We are assuming that it is true for n equal to k. So my proposition says 1 plus x whole raised to k is greater than 1 plus kx. Take the screenshot for this. So once we have proved the induction step, we have anchored the induction step, and then we are assuming the induction hypothesis. We'll have to prove it for n equal to k plus 1. So this is the proposition which we want to prove, that 1 plus x whole raised to k plus 1 is greater than 1 plus k plus 1 times x. So we'll consider our LHS. The LHS is 1 plus x raised to k plus 1. We are writing down as this particular bracket as factors of two brackets. One is 1 plus x and one is 1 plus x raised to k. But I know that 1 plus x raised to k is greater than 1 plus kx. So if 1 plus x into 1 plus kx, if I simplify, I will get it as 1 plus kx, 1 plus kx plus kx square, which I can always write down as 1 plus k plus 1 times of x plus kx square. But we already know x square is greater than 0 and k is a natural number. From our induction hypothesis, we know k is natural number. So k into x square is greater than 0. That means this term has to be greater than the addition of first two terms. This simply says LHS is greater than RHS. This says PK plus 1 is true. Thus PK is true implies PK plus 1 is true. Therefore, by principle of mathematical induction, we are saying Pn is true for all n greater than 1 for all x greater than 0. Any doubts in this? Take the screenshot for this. Have a look at this particular example. This says prove by induction that a finite set of cardinality n has 2 raised to n subsets. We have seen earlier that if a set contains n elements, then its cardinality, the power set, cardinality is 2 raised to n. But now using induction, I have to prove this. So we will first define our proposition or the statement that Pn denotes a finite set of cardinality n has 2 raised to n subsets. Please note, whenever you're going to proceed further with mathematical induction process, you will have to clearly define what is your proposition. If you have not defined clearly your proposition, there is possibility that you will come to a wrong conclusion in the anchoring step or in the induction hypothesis step. So this says we're defining Pn as a finite set of cardinality n has 2 raised to n subsets. So we should go for our first step, which is basic step or anchoring the induction. If there are no elements in the set, that is the cardinality of set is 0, then the power set will have 2 raised to 0 subsets. So the assertion is true for n equal to 0 because the set of cardinality 0 is empty and it has exactly 2 raised to 0 equal to 1 subset, namely itself. So the power set, sorry, so the power set will have only one set inside it, which is empty set. Hence, the cardinality of that set will be 1. If you have any doubt in this first step, please ask. Everyone, please ponder on this step and tell me, did you understand this? This is very important. Ashish, what is written? I have said same thing. But still, have a look at this. I have a set which is empty. Empty means it is, hold on please. It is free. I want to get power set of A. What will be there in power set of A? In power set of A, I will have only one element. Since this has no element, I will have one element in this, which will be A. Or I can say, so check the cardinality of A is 0. But what is the cardinality of its power set? The cardinality of power set is 1. That is, the set itself is there as the element in the power set. This is what we have said. It says the assertion is true for n equal to 0 because the set of cardinality 0 is empty and has exactly 2 raised to 0 subsets. That is 2 raised to 0 equal to 1 subsets, namely itself. Ashish, is it clear now? Okay, then we'll proceed further. So we have said P of 0 is true. That means Pn is true for n equal to 0. Please note we have started with n equal to 0 and we have not started with n equal to 1. And I do not know any set which has elements as minus 1. I do not know any finite set whose cardinality is minus 1. If there is no element in it, how can I remove it? Minus 1 says from an empty set you're removing an element, but there is no element in it. How do I remove it? Hence, the minimum value which we have to start with is n equal to 0. So now we are assuming that let it be true for n equal to k. When we say it is true for n equal to k, we are saying that a proposition is true. A finite set of cardinality k has 2 raised to k subsets. And we have to prove for n equal to k plus 1. But before we proceed for n equal to k plus 1, I want you to understand when I have one element, when I have two elements, when I have three elements, what happens? If this process is clear, you will be able to understand for n equal to k plus 1. Now check, if there is only one element, a1, then its cardinality is 1. Therefore, it has 2 raised to 1 equal to 2 subsets. Which two subsets? One is the empty set and other is the set having only one element. If I have two elements in it, a equal to a1 and a2, then its cardinality is 2. Therefore, it has 2 square equal to 4 subsets. That is, cardinality of power set of A is 4. But what is my power set of A? It is the empty set, a singleton set A1, singleton set A2, and the set itself. Now please check, I have written down two sets in red and two sets in black. That means it has some connection with this particular step, step 1. In the step 1, I'm taking these two sets as they are. That means I am first looking at A equal to A1, A2 set as only set having A1 element. I'll repeat. I'm trying to write down A equal to the set A1, A2 as a only set having A1 union A2. That means my first set has only first element A1. and then I'm putting union A2. But how many sets do I have for the first set? For the first set having one element, I have two subsets, phi and A1. Is that point clear? What did I do? So now check, I am writing down this as A1 and A2. So can I write down this particular part as A1 Can I write down A1 as these two sets? Yes or no? Can I write down A as these two sets? Yes. Then do I know what is the power set of A1? Do I know what is power set of A1? Do I know what is power set of A1? It is P and A1 itself. People are not responding. If you don't understand this particular step, I don't guarantee you that you will understand the next step. I'm simply asking you. I've written down in step 2, I've written down this set as union of two sets. One is having only A1 and other is having A2. So I am first writing down all the subsets of singleton set A1. What are the subsets of singleton set A1? Phi and A1. Now I am going to take A2 and add that A2 element in these two sets. So I will get, if I add A2 to a set phi, I will get a singleton set. If I add A2 to a singleton set A1, I will get A1, A2. These are all the four subsets of A. Check for the next one. Now it will become more clear. Now I have a set A1, A2, A3. Its cardinality is 3. So it should have 8 subsets. From where am I going to generate these 8 subsets? Very first thing, again I will write down this as union of two sets. Now union of two sets means whatever is the previous step, A1, A2, that particular set union a singleton set A3. But do I know how many subsets this particular set has A1, A2? Yes, these are 4. So A1, A2 will have 4 subsets. So you can see A1, A2 has 4 subsets, which are this phi, A1, A2, A1, A2. But which element has come now? A3. Now, if you have this A3 in these previous 4 sets, add A3 as its element. So if I add A3 in phi, I will get a singleton set A3. If I add A3 in the first set, I will get A1, A3. If I get A3 in second set, I will get A2, A3. And if I add A3 in this, I will get A1, A2, A3. So at each step, if you see, in the previous step, there were 2. I had added A2 in the first step. I got 2 more. That means if there were 2, it is doubling up. It is becoming 4. Now, if I had 4, I have added A3, it is doubling up. So 4 and 4, it is becoming 8. Similarly, if I have A1, A2, A3, A4, then I will take one set as set having elements A1, A2, A3 and the other one as A4. For A3, I have 8 elements, 8 subsets. And when I add A4, I will get 8 more. So I will be getting 16 elements, which is 2 raised to 4. If you have any doubt in this particular thing, please ask. People are not responding. They have stopped responding. Even I will stop responding. So if this step is clear, we will proceed for k plus 1 step. For k plus 1 step, I am taking a set having k plus 1 elements. So I am taking the set A as A1, A2, A3, AK, AK plus 1. Now, if I write down this as union of two sets, one having cardinality K and other a singleton set AK plus 1, then using the induction hypothesis, what I can say? I can say the subsets A which do not contain this new element are the subsets of the set A prime equal to A1, A2, A3 till AK of cardinality K, and by induction hypothesis their number is 2 raised to K. What we are saying here is, now if you have written down this A as A prime union a singleton set AK plus 1, then by induction hypothesis I already know that A prime has 2 raised to K subsets. Now my next job is to add only this new element AK plus 1 to each and every set. If I add them into each and every set, the remaining subsets of A, that is those containing AK plus 1, are obtained by adding AK plus 1 to each of these two subsets. Therefore, the number of subsets of A is double the previous number. So it is 2 times of 2K, which is 2K plus 1. This says PK plus 1 is true. Thus, PK is true implies PK plus 1 is true. Therefore, by the principle of mathematical induction, Pn is true for all n greater than equal to 0. I have to make some modification. Any doubts in this? Please note that this particular example, we have done it earlier also. We have proved this combinatorically also. Same proof can be proved in various different ways. One is combinatorically, second is using set theoretical notation, third is using your principle of mathematical induction. There are few more. Pankaj, this is screenshot. Take the screenshot for example 7. We're proceeding for one more example for mathematical induction. This says that prove that the Fibonacci number F3n is divisible by 2. Now, when such kind of question has been put up, it is understood that you are well aware of what is a Fibonacci number. Now, there is difference in pronunciation for this particular term, Fibonacci and Fibonacci. Now, it depends upon in which country you are and how do they pronounce it, whether it is Fibonacci or Fibonacci. What do you want me to pronounce it as, Fibonacci or Fibonacci? So in that case, what should I do? I should go to Google and I should type there as pronouns. Can you see how to pronounce this in Italian?
pronouncenames.com.
Fibonacci,
Now, when you're going to use it Italian,
Fibonacci,
it'll say it as Fibonacci because Italian people they use it as Fibonacci.
Do we have the correct pronunciation of your name?
And if you just put up in UK or in English,
Fibonacci,
and here it says Fibonacci, and
Fibonacci,
if you hear it in US
Fibonacci,
or maybe in other French, you'll get it as Nasi. So it
Fibonacci,
depends upon where you are and which country you are. You'll have to pronounce it accordingly. Because many a times people are not able to pronounce Indian names also. Say for example, if you go to Spain, then people don't pronounce J as J. They pronounce it as K. So my cousin, her name is Jayvanti. But there, when she writes down Jayvanti, people call her as Kevanti. So they do not pronounce it correctly, the Indian names. Similarly, we also do not pronounce their names. Japanese and Italian mathematicians or Greek mathematicians, we will have to ask them, how do you pronounce it? Now, if you ask me to read More, how do I read it? More, More. But see, there are some people, they have their surname as More. I cannot read it as More or more. If it is surname, I have to use it as More. But if I have to use it as a term, then or a word in English, I'll reuse it as or I'll read it as more, not more. So there is difference in reading also over there. Same way, these mathematicians also, you'll have to ask them, how do you pronounce your name? And then people are going to tell you, this is how I pronounce. So I'm going to use it as Fibonacci and not Fibonacci. I'm using an Italian name, Fibonacci. We first have to define upon Fibonacci numbers, F1, F2, Fn, so on. We know how these are defined. So when such kind of question is given, first we'll have to define what do you mean by Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci numbers says first two terms are 1 and then the next term is being calculated using the recursive formula f of n equal to f of n minus 1 plus f of n minus 2 for n greater than 2. So if I have to compute f of 3, then I'll have to write down this as f of 3 is f of 2 plus f of 1. If I have to compute f of 10, then I'll compute it as f of 9 plus f of 8. So we have defined what do I mean by Fibonacci numbers. So let Pn denote the statement that f of 3n is divisible by 2. So now my proposition is f of 3n is divisible by 2. We have seen this earlier also. When I say it is divisible by 2, this simply says f of 3n can be written as multiple of 2. That means in the equation form, I'll be able to write down f of 3n equal to twice of some integer. So we are substituting the value of n as 1. If I substitute the value of n as 1, my proposition says that f of 3 is divisible by 2. So I have to prove, is f of 3 divisible by 2? What is f of 3? It is f of 2 plus f of 1 using this recursive definition. But what is f of 2? 1. What is f of 1? 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, which is definitely divisible by 2. Hence we have said P1 is true. Now we have to assume P of k is true. So we are saying P of k is true means f of 3k is divisible by 2. This implies f of 3k, f3k is equal to 2 into r for some positive integer r. Let me correct that statement. Take the screenshot for this so that I can proceed for n equal to k plus 1. So now we want to prove it for n equal to k plus 1. That simply says we want to say that f of 3 into k plus 1 is divisible by 2. So we'll consider f of 3k plus 1. When I open the brackets in the subscript, I will get it as f of 3k plus 3. But using the recursive definition, I can write down this as the previous term and previous to previous term. That means minus 1 and minus 2 of this number. So 3k plus 3 minus 1 is 3k plus 2, and 3k plus 3 minus 2 is 3k plus 1. Now, I cannot see any 3k arriving over here. So if I can't see any 3k arriving here, I will use my recursive definition one more time. So now I'm using my recursive definition on the highest subscript. The highest subscript is 3k plus 2. So if I use it for f of 3k plus 2, I will get it as f of 3k plus 1 plus f of 3k, and this term as it is. Now I can rearrange and write down this as f of 3k plus twice of f of 3k plus 1. So this particular second term has got a number 2. So I can say it is a factor of 2. Or I can say it is divisible by 2. But how about f of 3k? Using the induction hypothesis, I know f of 3k is 2 times of r. And this term comes as it is. We are taking 2 common, and I'll get some integer over here. Twice of some integer. And this is definitely divisible by 2. Thus, we have proved pk implies pk plus 1. Therefore, by principle of mathematical induction, Pn is true. Take the screenshot for this. Then we're proceeding further with second principle of mathematical induction. What was my first principle of mathematical induction? We had first step as anchoring the induction. Second step was pk implies pk plus 1. That means we were relying only on the previous step. So if I had to prove it for k plus 1, I was relying on kth step. But principle of second principle of mathematical induction says your anchoring step will remain same, but there is change in hypothesis step. What does that mean? It says that if you have to prove pk plus 1 is true, then you need not rely only on the previous step, but you can take all the steps above that to be true. That means if you want to prove pk plus 1 is true, then you can use all these steps right from your n equal to 1 till n equal to k. You are free to use any of these steps. That is second principle of mathematical induction. So what does this say? Please note that things are highlighted in red over there. This says let Sn be an open statement involving a positive integer n. If S1 is true, my induction step remains same. The anchoring the induction step remains same. The basis step remains same. If for all integers m, please note m is between 1 and k. If for all integers m, assuming that the statement Sm is true, implies that statement Sk plus 1 is true. What is this? This says S1 is true, S2 is true, S3 is true, S4 is true, till Sk is true. So now you're taking help of all these statements S1, S2, S3, S4 till Sk. Using that, you are saying Sk plus 1 is true. Then you will say Sn is true. Check what is the difference. Difference was earlier we were saying S1 is true, Sk is true implies Sk plus 1 is true. But now I'm not saying only Sk. I'm saying S1 is true, S2 is true, S3 is true, Sk is true implies Sk plus 1 is true. So this statement changes in this fashion. Anchoring the induction remains same. Induction hypothesis now it says the validity of Pm for m between 1 and k implies the validity of Pn for n equal to k. Then only I can say this. Take the screenshot for this second principle of mathematical induction and put up the queries if you have any. I am still worried none of you are asking any queries. I hope my efforts are not going futile. Are you able to understand what we are doing, or simply it is bouncers? Feeling shy to write down bouncer in the chat panel? I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished. People have started leaving. Go home. Tanuj, we haven't done the examples on second principle of mathematical induction. The moment I will do that, I'll let you know how to use and what to use. And it will be a common sense there that if you get stuck up at a step where n equal to k, that is pk is not helping, Definitely you'll go one step before that. You will go for pk minus 1. If that is also not helping you much, then you will go for one step prior to that. Maybe for k equal to k minus 2, and then k minus 3, and then k minus 4, and so on. So let's look at this example. So this says, use strong form of mathematical induction to prove that every natural number n greater than equal to 2 is either prime or product of primes. This is or product of primes. So we will put up our proposition which says every natural number n greater than equal to 2 is either prime or product of primes. Please make it as or. So we are saying let n equal to 2. We already know 2 is prime. So my P2 is true. That is Pn is true for n equal to 2. Then I'm assuming that Pm is true for all the values between 2 to k. That means I am assuming that 2 is prime, 3 is prime. What is 4? Is it prime? No, but I can write down 4 as 2 into 2. So it is product of primes. 5 is prime. How can I write down 6? 6 is 2 into 3. It is product of primes. 7 is prime. 8 is 2 into 2 into 2. Product of primes. 9, 3 into 3. Product of primes. 10, 2 into 5. Product of primes. 11, prime. That means I have now taken into consideration all the numbers till k. Either they themselves are prime or they are product of primes. So this is my induction step. Induction step says every natural number from 2 to k is either a prime or product of primes. So for k plus 1 step, we will say now there are two possibilities. Either the number which you're giving me, k plus 1, either it is prime or it is not prime. If it is prime, my problem is solved. Then the statement is true. If k plus 1 is prime, then the statement is true. I'm saying assume that you have proved that all the numbers till 26, that is from 2 to 26, either they are prime or they are product of primes. So you go one step ahead and then you write down 26 plus 1, which is 27. So you will say 27 is prime or not prime. If it is prime, my problem is solved. But if it is not prime, then I can always write down 27 as factors of two numbers. So I'm factoring it as k plus 1 as a into b. Now, if I have factored into a into b, then I should know whether a and b, these are primes or not. So how can I write down 27? I can write down 27 as 3 into 9. 3 is prime. But how about 9? 9 is product of primes. So in this case, we are saying we are writing down k plus 1 as a into b, where a and b are natural numbers which are between 2 and k. But by the induction hypothesis, each of a and b is either prime or product of primes. Thus, k plus 1 is product of primes as required. Therefore, pk plus 1 is true. Therefore, by strong principle of mathematical induction, Pn is true. Now check, in this case, I did not use that the previous step, kth step is true. I am saying from 2 to k, this a might be any number, na? I am not simply saying that I can write down k plus 1 as k into something, but I'm writing down it as k plus 1 as a into b, where a and b are any numbers between 2 and k. And this is where we are using second principle of mathematical induction. Is it fine? I will stop here.
Hello everyone. Am I audible to all of you? Okay, let's begin this session. So in last session, we have seen minimization of an automata, and we have seen one example on that, right? And I asked you to solve this particular example by yourself. So have you tried this? Okay, I'll wait for a few more seconds. Please finish off your function PRN. Okay, let's begin now. So, what are the steps to minimize an automata? Anyone can help me? What is our first step to minimize an automata? Do you remember the steps or should we repeat the steps one more time? Yes, anyone? Priyanka is saying we have to segregate final and the non-final states. So before that, we have one more step. We have to convert this particular automata in the transition table. First, we have to identify which are the final and the non-final state. Then we have to check for the non-reachable states and remove that, right? And then third step was to convert this automata into the state transition table. So which one of them is a final state and which are the non-final states? We have 8 states in total in this particular example, out of which one is a final state and which are the non-final states? So we have state Q2 with 2 concentric circle. That is our final state. Rest all are our non-final states, right? So next step was to find the unreachable state. Do we have any state which is unreachable in this example? Please check, do we have any state which is unreachable? How do we identify an unreachable state? If a state does not have any incoming arrow, which means we are not able to reach that state anyway. Do we have any state which is not having any incoming arrows? It's Q3. So Q3 is an unreachable state. So we are going to remove this state from our transition table. Right? Now, the third step was to convert this automata into a state transition table. So have you tried this at your home? Only Priyanka has tried. Nobody else. Now complex automata देख के start ही नहीं किया try करना. Okay, let's check the solution. First step was to identify the final and the non-final state. As you have said already that we have only single final state, that is Q2, and rest all, that is from Q0 to Q7 except Q2 are non-final states. Okay? And next step was to check which of them is unreachable state. Unreachable state कैसे identify करेंगे? A state with no incoming transition is your unreachable state, right? So in this particular automata, we have state Q3 where we don't have any incoming transition, right? So that is nothing but your unreachable state. Check here. Since Q3 is non-reachable, we are going to remove that from our transition table. The third step is to convert this automata into the transition table, right? So we'll be having how many states in our transition table? We'll be having all the states except Q3, right? So this is the structure of your transition table. Q0 is your initial state and Q2 is your final state. So there's an asterisk near Q2 and check we are not going to include Q3 because we have removed that from our state transition table because we cannot reach there. Right? So now the next step to fill the entries from the given automaton. So quickly help me to fill the entries. Q0 on 0. What is the transition of Q0 on 0? Q0 on 1. Q1 on 0. Yes, Q1 on 0. It's Q6. Q1 on 1. It's moving to the final state, that is Q2. Q2 on 0. Moving to the initial state, that is Q1, Q0. Q2 on 1. We have a loop on Q2 only. Now Q3, we are not going to check for the transition because we are not going to include that in our transition table. So we move to Q4. Q4 on 0. Q7. Q4 on 1. Q5, right? Q5 on 0. Q2. Q5 on 1. Q6. Q6 on 0. We have a loop. Q6 on 1 is moving to Q4. The last one, Q7 on 0. Q6. Q7 on 1. Moving to the final state, right? So here are our entries. Please verify your entries. Okay. Now we have reached till step 3. We have filled the entries in our transition table after removing the unreachable state. What is the next step? What is the next step? The next step was to check which of the states, which of the given states are equivalent to each other, right? So for that, we are going to make an equivalence table by checking the two states at a time, at which of them are equivalent, right? Check here. So for the zeroth equivalent, it's very easy. We are going to segregate our final and non-final states, right? So in zeroth equivalence, we can say state 0, Q0, Q1, Q4, Q5, Q6, Q7 are equivalent to each other, and Q2 is in the another set, right? That is our zeroth equivalence. Please take, we don't have Q3 here, right? Now for one's equivalence, what is the process? For one's equivalence, we are going to check first two states, like from the first set, Q0 and Q1, where they are going on the input 0 and input 1. If they will move to the same state, good, which means they are equivalent. If they are moving to the different states, but the different states are the part of the same set in the previous row, then also they are equivalent, right? But if they are not the part of the same set, then we'll say they are not equivalents, and then we break them into two different sets, right? So we are starting with Q0 and Q1. Take here Q0 and Q1. Now we need to check where Q0 and Q1 are going on 0. Check here where they are going on 0. It's Q1 and Q6. Now you have to tell me Q1 and Q6 are the part of same set in the previous row or not. They are same. So can we say Q0 and Q1 are equivalents? No, we don't. We can't say yet because the condition says we need to check on both the inputs, right? So on 0, it's fine. Now we have to check on 1 also. Check here. Where they are going on 1. Are they moving to the same state? They are not moving to the same state. They are moving to the two different states, that is Q5 and Q2. Now we have to check Q5 and Q2 are the part of same set in the previous row or not. Are they? No, which means Q0 and Q1 are not the equivalent to each other. We are going to break them into two parts, right? We are going to put Q0 and Q1 into the different sets. Check here. Now we'll check with Q4. So first you have to check Q4 with Q0, whether Q4 is equivalent to Q0 or Q4 is equivalent to Q1, or maybe it may not equivalent to any of them. So we are going to make the third set for Q4. Okay. So we'll start with Q0 and Q4. Okay. Are you getting, do you remember the steps? I hope, right? We have solved one example also. याद है ना steps? Okay, let's see whether Q0 and Q4 are equivalent to each other or not. So on Q0 and Q4 on 0, they are moving to Q1 and Q7. They be part of same set. Q1 and Q7. They are the part of the same set in the previous row, so no problem. We'll check on 1. Where they are moving on 1, both are moving to Q5, right? So no problem. They can move to the same state or the different state, but they should be the part of same set in the previous row. So can we say Q4 and Q0 and Q4 are equivalent? Check here. I have put Q4 equivalent to Q0, right? Now we'll move to Q5. We need to check Q5 is equivalent to Q0 and Q4, or it is equivalent to Q1, or it may not be equivalent to any of. So instead of checking Q0 and Q5, I'm checking Q5 and Q4 because Q4 is equivalent to Q0. And if Q5 is equivalent to Q4, which means Q5 will be equivalent to Q0, right? So you can check it with Q0 also, no issues. So let's check Q4 and Q5 where they are going on 0. Are they moving to the same set? No, they are moving to Q7 and Q2. They both are not in the same set in the previous row. So we cannot say Q5 is equivalent to Q4 and Q0, right? So we have to check whether is it equivalent to Q1 or not. So Q5 and Q1. Check where they are moving on 0. They are moving to Q6 and Q2. Same set. Same set or not? No, which means Q5 is not equivalent to Q1 also, right? So we are going to put Q5 in the separate set only, which is not equivalent to Q0 and not equivalent to Q1, right? Check here, I made the third set with Q5. Not now, we are moving to Q6. So we have to check whether Q6 is equivalent to Q0 and Q4, or is it equivalent to Q1, or is it equivalent to Q5, or it may form a separate set only, right? So I'll start with Q0 and Q6. Check here, Q0 on and Q6 on 0, where they are going. They are moving to Q1 and Q6, right? Are they the part of same set? Are Q1 and Q6 belong to the same set in the previous row? Yes. So no problem. Whereas 0 is concerned, we'll check on 1. Check here where they are moving on 1, Q0 and Q6 on 1. Where are they moving? Yes, I'm not getting answers. Q5 and Q4, are they belongs to the same set? So can we say Q6 is equivalent to Q0? So I'm going to put Q6 in my first set with Q0 and Q4. Since Q6 is equivalent to Q0, which means it will be equivalent to Q4 also, right? Check here. So I put the entry in the first set, right? Now the last one, that is Q7. We need to check whether is it equivalent to this set or Q1 or Q5, right? So I'll start with Q7, Q0. Tell me, Q7, Q0, where they are moving on 0. Q1 and Q6. Both of them belongs to the same set in the previous row, right? Which means okay for the 0. Now we'll check for the 1. Where are they moving on 1, Q0 and Q7? Where are they moving on 1? Q5 and Q2, same set or not? They doesn't belong to the same set, right? Which means Q7 is not equivalent to Q0. So we'll check now Q7 is equivalent to Q1 or not, right? It is not belonging to the first set, so we'll check whether is it equivalent to the second set with Q1, right? We'll check Q1 and Q7 on 0. Same entry, Q6, no problem, right? Check here. Q1 and Q7 on 1. Where are they moving? Same entry. So can we say Q7 is equivalent to Q1? So I'm going to put Q7 in my second set with Q1, right? Check here. Rest all, since Q5 was alone, so it is a singleton set, and Q2 was a singleton set. I'm keeping it as it is. Now, once you finish any equivalence class, you need to compare that class with the previous row. Are they same or not? If they are same, we'll stop the procedure there. If not, we'll find the another equivalence class. Now in this case, Q0 and Q1 are not same, right? So we'll move to the two equivalence class. For not two equivalence class, we'll be considering the entry from one equivalence class, right? We'll start with Q0 and Q4. We'll check whether Q0 and Q4 are two equivalents with each other, and Q0 and Q6 are two equivalents with each other or not, right? So we'll start with Q0 and Q4. Same procedure. I'll wait for a few seconds. You tell me what are the sets in the two equivalence class. Try to solve it by yourself. Tell me, Q0 and Q4 are equivalent to each other or not? Shall we check the answer? Okay, we're checking on Q0 and Q4. Q0 and Q4, they are moving on the Q1 and Q7 on 0. And if you check, Q7 and Q1 are in the same set in the previous row. So no problem for the 0, right? What about 1? They both are moving to the Q5. So are they equivalent or not? Priyanka, you said not the same set. Yes. Is it clear to you people, or you have any doubt here? Q0 and Q4 both are moving to the Q1 and Q7. Q1 and Q7 are the part of same set. Check here. I didn't say it should belongs to the same set here. But they are the part of same set, right? Q1 and Q7. And for 1, we have the single entry, right? So can we say Q0 and Q4 are equivalent to each other? Check here. Q0 and Q4 on 0, they are moving to Q1 and Q7. Since Q1 and Q7 are in the same set, so we can say they are equivalent to each other, no problem for the 0. And for 1, they both are moving to Q5, right? So we can say Q0 and Q4 are equivalent to each other. We are going to put both of them in the same set. Now we'll check whether Q6 is equivalent to Q0 and Q4 or not. So I'll check for Q0 and Q6, right? So Q0 on Q6 on 0, are they moving to the same set? Tell me, are they moving to the same set or not? No. Q0 and Q6 on 0, they are moving to Q1 and Q6. But as you can see, Q1 and Q6 are not the part of same set. So we'll stop here, which means Q0 and Q6 are not equivalent to each other. So I'll finish this set here and I'll make another set with Q6, right? Check here. Now this first set in the one equivalence is over. Now we'll move to the second set. Now we need to check Q1 and Q7 are one equivalent to each other. Now in this part, we'll check whether they are two equivalent to each other or not, right? So the same procedure, we'll consider Q1 and Q7 and we'll check where they are moving on 0 and 1. On 0, they both are moving to the same state, right? So no problem. On 1, where are they moving? Both are moving to the Q2, which means same state, right? So are they equivalent? So we'll put them in the same set, Q1 and Q7, and Q5 and Q2 are singleton sets. They were not one equivalent to any of them. So we'll keep them as it is, right? We are not going to check their equivalence with any other state because they are singleton sets. Now we finished with two equivalents, and next part is to check whether one's equivalence and two equal or not. Are they equal? No. So we'll move to the three equivalence class. Now for three equivalence class, we are going to check the equivalence between Q0 and Q4 and we'll check whether Q1 and Q7 are equivalent to each other or not. The singleton sets here, we'll keep them as it is, right? So we'll start with Q0 and Q4. Check here. Q0 and Q4. Tell me, are they equivalent to each other or not? Q0 and Q4, they are moving on Q1 and Q7 on 0. Q1 and Q7 belongs to the same set in the previous row, so no problem. Right? You have to check the previous row. And Q0 and Q4 on 1, where they are moving. Both are moving to Q5, right? So no problem again. We'll put them in the one set. Now Q6 was singleton. I'm keeping it as it is. Next, we move to this part. That is Q1 and Q7. Q1 and Q7 on 0. If you can see, both are moving to the same state. Q6 and Q1 and Q7 on 1. both are moving to the same state, that is Q2, right? So can we say Q1 and Q7 are equivalent to each other? Yes, we can say both are equivalent to each other. So I wrote Q1 and Q7 in the same set as singleton sets as it is. Now check two equivalence class and three equivalence class. Are they same? Yes. So we'll stop our procedure here. So our new states are Q0, Q4, single state, Q6, Q1, Q7, single state, Q5 and Q4. So from the 8 states, we have minimized our DFA with the 5 states, right? 2, 3 निकल गया और 2 states combine हो गए, right? So our new transition table will look like this. Okay, I forgot to put the transition table here. I directly draw the diagram. So if you have problem by drawing diagram directly, you can put the transition table. कैसे रहेगा transition table? We'll make one table with these states, that is Q0, Q4. That will be your first initial state, right? Next will be your Q2. Next will be your Q1, Q7 combined state, Q5 single state, and Q6 single state. And Q2 is your final state. We'll keep that as your final state only. Check in the diagram. Can you see Q0, Q4? Both are in the same state. We have Q1, Q7, one state, Q2, Q6, and Q5. Is it okay? There is one mistake. This should be concentric double circle, but I made this as a double circle. So I'll change this part and give the solution in the next session. So for timing, is it okay how we made our 8-state automata into the 5-state automata? They don't take the screenshot of this. I will change this final resultant and will give you the screenshot in next session. Okay, if you want, I'll give you the table also. 1 equivalence and 6 equivalence not understand. One equivalence. Okay, Vanita. Is this you're talking about, Vanita? In 1's equivalence, why Q6 belongs to the first group, right? So we will be checking Q6 with Q0. If you check Q6 with Q0, it's moving to Q1 and Q6 on 0. Q1 and Q6 both are the part of same set in the previous row, right? So no problem for 0. Now we'll check for 1. If you check on 1, Q6 and Q0 both are moving to Q5 and Q4 on 1. Again, Q4 and Q5 are the part of same set in the previous row. So no problem. Hence, Q0 and Q6 are equivalent to each other. Is it okay, Vanita? Okay. Any problem in the minimization? Just a moment, I think my slide down there. any problem in the minimization of automata? All these steps are clear to you? Okay. Let's check one more example. So here in this example, if you can see, the pictorial representation of your automata is not given. Directly, you will be providing a transition table, right? So from this transition table, up the first step is to identify the final and the non-final state. So from the notation like asterisk near your state, you can understand that is my final state. So can you tell me which of them are final state? Q3 and Q4 are our final state in this example. Rest all are our non-final state, right? Now the next step was to identify the non-reachable state. Now how will you identify the non-reachable state if you are given a table? Can you identify the non-reachable state out of these 8 states? That is Q0 to Q7, we have 8 states. How are you going to identify a non-reachable state? Okay, to identify the non-reachable state from the state transition table, you have to check in these two rows where our states are moving to on both of the inputs. Right? If any of this entry does not contain any state, which means that state is not there. We have states from Q0 to Q7. So Q0 is the initial state, so we will be keeping Q0 as it is, but we'll start checking from Q1 to Q7. So we'll start checking from Q1. So in the highlighted area, you have to check, are we getting Q1 one time or any of the time? We have Q1 entry in this highlighted part, right? Which means Q1, we are reaching Q1. What about Q2? Is it reachable or not? Can we reach Q2? Yes. Q0 on B, we are moving to Q2, which means we can reach Q2.
तुम्हाला येतं शिकवता